Over-control occurs when otherwise loving parents try to protect their children from making mistakes by having too strict rules and limits. The problem with over-control is that while a major responsibility of good parents is certainly to be control, the problem with over-control is that while a major responsibility of good parents is certainly to control and protect, they must make room for their children to make mistakes. Remember that we learn maturity by constant use. Assertive. Assertive type belie- Assertive type believes time is money. Every wasted minute is a wasted dollar. Self-image linked to how many things they can accomplish in a period of time. Getting the solution perfect isn't as important as getting it done. Fiery people who love winning above all else, often at others' expense. Always direct and candid. Aggressive communication style. Don't worry about future interactions. Don't worry about future interactions. View of business relationship is based on respect, nothing more and nothing less. Assertives want to be heard. They don't actually have the ability to listen to you until they know you've heard them. Focus on their own goals. Assertive 2. Assertives focus on their own goals rather than people. They rather tell than ask. When dealing with assertive types, it's best to focus on what they have to say, because once they are convinced you understand them, then and only then will they listen for your point of view. For them, every silence is an opportunity to speak more. Mirrors are a wonderful tool of this type. So are calibrated questions, labels, and summaries. The most important thing to get from assertive will be a "that's right." It may come in the form of "that's it exactly" or "you hit it on the head." Give an inch, take a mile mentality. Will that figure they deserve whatever you have given them? Assertive 3. Will be oblivious to expectations of owing something in return. Actually, simply looking for the opportunity to receive more. If they have given some kind of concession, they are surely counting the seconds until they get something in return. If you are assertive, be particularly conscious of your tone. You will not intend to be overly harsh, but you will often come off that way. Intentionally soften your tone and work to make it more pleasant. Use calibrated questions and labels with your counterparts, since that will also make you more approachable and increase the chances for collaboration. Accommodator. Most important to this type is the time spent building the relationship. Of the three types, most likely to build great rapport without actually accomplishing anything. If they are your counterpart, be sociable and friendly. Use calibrated questions focused specifically on implementation to nudge them along. Find ways to translate their talk into action. First, to reciprocate. May agree to give something they can't deliver. Approach to preparation can be lacking. Focused on the person behind the table. Tremendous passion for the spirit of negotiation and what it takes not only to manage emotions but also to satisfy them. Accommodator 2. Very easy to disagree with. Want nothing more than to hear what you have to say. Uncovering objections can be difficult. We'll have identified potential problem areas beforehand and will leave those areas unaddressed out of the fear of conflict they may cause. If you stick to ability to be very likable, do not sacrifice your objections. Other two types need to hear your point of view. Another accommodator will welcome it. Be conscious of excess chit chat. If sitting across the table with an accommodator, will be prone to interactions where nothing gets done. Analyst. Analysts are methodical and diligent. Their self-image is linked to minimizing mistakes. Their motto: as much time as it takes to get it right, prefer to work on their own, rarely deviate from their goals, rarely show emotion, often speak in a way that is distant and cold instead of soothing. Puts people off without them knowing it and actually limits them from putting their counterpart at ease and opening up. Hate surprises. Reserved problem solvers and information aggregators. Hypersensitive to reciprocity. Hypersensitive to reciprocity since they like working on things alone. The fact that they are talking to you from their perspective is a concession. Analysts 2. View concessions from their counterpart as new piece of information to be taken back and evaluated. Don't expect immediate counter proposals. Skeptical by nature, not going to want to answer until they understand all the implications. With them, it's vital to be prepared. Use clear data to drive your reason. Don't ad-lib. Use data to use data comparisons to disagree and focus on the facts. Warn them of issues early. Avoid surprises. Silence to them is an opportunity to think, not mad or trying to give you a chance to talk. If you feel they don't see things the way you do, give them a chance to think first. Apologies here have little value to them since they see the negotiation and their relationship with you as a person largely as separate things. Analyst 3. Respond fairly well in the moment to labels. Not quick to answer calibrated questions or close-ended questions when the answer is yes. May need a few days to respond. I think straight shooter. If you're an analyst, you should be worried about cutting yourself off from an essential source of data, your counterpart. The single biggest thing you can do is smile when you talk. People will be more forthcoming with information as a result. Smiling can also become a habit that makes it easy for you to mask any moments you've been caught off guard. Listen, I'm in a time crunch. I just emailed you a draft of my presentation for next week's board meeting. All it needs is a little rewriting and editing, and I need to distribute it to the executive team for a preliminary review tomorrow. But I'm sure a quick turnaround will be no problem for you. Smile ingratiatingly. Use your skills to reveal surprises that are certain to exist. Gently guide my counterpart to discover my goal as their own. Engagement or buy-in. Life is negotiation. Negotiation serves two vital life functions: information gathering, behavior influencing. No's were the gateway to yes. Give counterpart time to pivot, adjust, and re-examine to create the environment for the one yes that matters. Letting the other side know they are welcome to say no has a positive impact on any negotiation. Inviting for the other side to say no has an amazing power to bring down barriers and allow for beneficial communication. Labeling. Repeating your counterpart's perspective back to them. Transforming encounters from confrontational showdowns into joint problem-solving sessions. Calibrated questions are the best tool. How am I supposed to do that? Hear no as something other than rejection and respond accordingly. Rethink no in one of its alternatives and more real meanings. Then, after pausing, ask solution-based questions or simply label their effort. Simply label the effect. What about this doesn't work for you? If despite all my efforts the other party won't say no, I'm dealing with people who are indecisive or confused or have a hidden agenda. If those cases, I have to end the negotiation and walk away. No means a no-go. Diffuse negative dynamics by bringing them into the open. Calm people down, establish rapport, gain trust, elicit the verbalization of needs, persuade the other guy of our empathy. Anchor their emotions. Once anchoring emotions in a minefield of low expectations, play on their loss aversion. Call isn't about being cut from X to X minus Y, but how not to lose X minus Y to other circumstances, a guy, or out of their control. Bend their reality. When selling myself to a manager, sell myself and my success as a way they can validate their own intelligence and broadcast it to the rest of their company. Once I've bent their reality, they include me as their ambassador. They'll have a stake in my success. Get over that fear of conflict and navigate it with empathy if you're going to be great at anything. Ignore that little genie who's telling you to give up, to just get along, as well as the other genie who's telling you to lash out and yell. Embrace regular, thoughtful conflicts as the basis of effective negotiation. You can bend your counterpart's reality by anchoring his starting point. Before you make an offer, emotionally anchor them by saying how bad it will be. When you get to numbers, set an extreme anchor to make your real offer seem reasonable, or use a range to seem less aggressive. The real value of anything depends on what vantage point you're looking at it from. Mm. Solution-based questions. What about this doesn't work for you? What would you need to make it work? It seems like there's something here that bothers you. Get people to say no early. They need to. What kind of black swans do you look to be aware of as negative leverage? Pieces of information obliquely revealed that show what is important to their counterpart. Who is their audience? What signifies status and reputation to them? What most worries them? One method. Go outside the negotiating table and speak to a third party that knows your counterpart. Most effective method is to gather from interactions with your counterpart. Find the black swan. Get FaceTime. You've got to get him to dinner. You're going to say, would it be a bad idea for me to take you to your favorite steakhouse and we just have a few laughs and we don't talk business? The only way the process was going to move forward was through direct human interaction. Subtle technique. Label your negative leverage and thereby make it clear without attacking. Sentences like, it seems like you strongly value the fact that you're always paid on time, or it seems like you don't care what position you're leaving me in, can really open up the negotiation process. Use why effectively. Employ the defensiveness the question triggers to get your counterpart to defend your position. When you want to flip a dubious counterpart to your side, ask them, why would you do that? In the way that the that favors you. If you're working to lure a client away from a competitor, you might say, why would you ever do business with me? Why would you ever change from your existing supplier? They're great. In the questions, the why coaches your counterpart into working for you. Remember, pushing hard for what you believe is not selfish. It's not bullying. It's not just helping you. Your amygdala, the part of the brain that processes fear, will try to convince you to give up, to flee, because the other guy is right or you're being cruel. But if you're an honest, decent person looking for a reasonable outcome, you can ignore the amygdala. Why did you do it? Can it be calibrated to what caused you to do it? What is the biggest challenge you face? What about this is important to you? How can I help to make this better for us? How would you like me to proceed? What is it that brought us into this situation? How can we solve this problem? What's the objective? What are we trying to accomplish here? How am I supposed to do that? No is the start of the negotiation, not the end of it. It comes down to the deep need for autonomy. The goal is to identify what your counterparts actually need, monetarily, emotionally, or otherwise. Calibrated questions. How? Queries that the other side can respond to, but that have no fixed answers. It gives counterpart the illusion of control. They're the one with the answers and power after all, and it does all that without giving them any idea of how constrained they are by it. I think open-ended question. Make your soul an all-encompassing focus, the other person in what they have to say. Motive, true active listening. You can use what and how to calibrate any question nearly. Does this look something? Does this look like something you would like? Can it become, how does this look for you? Or, what about this works for you? What about this doesn't work for you? Mistake number 3. They have other interests. Counterparts are not acting irrationally. They are simply complying with needs and desires that you don't yet understand, what the world looks like to them based on their own set of rules. Bring the black swans to light. Labels can be phrased as statements or questions. The difference is whether you end with a downward or upward inflection. It seems like, it sounds like, it looks like. Feeling is a form of thinking. Yes is nothing without how. Asking how, knowing how, and defining how are all part of the effective negotiator's arsenal. He would be unarmed without them. Denying barriers or negative influences gives the credence. Denying barriers or negative influences gives them credence. Get them into the open. Reasons why a counterpart will not make an agreement are more powerful than why they will. First, clear the barriers. Disarm, redirect, and dismantle. Do so in a relationship affirming way. Accusation audit. Listing every terrible thing your counterpart could say about you. Ask for input through open-ended/calibrated questions. Acknowledging counterparts' fear conditions them to look for common ground. Black swans are leverage multipliers. Leverage is the magic word, the ability to inflict loss and withhold gain. Where does your counterpart want to gain, and what do they fear losing? Discover these pieces and you'll be able to leverage over the other side's perceptions, actions, and decisions. Where our irrational perceptions are a reality, loss and gain are slippery notions. It often doesn't matter what leverage actually exists against you. What really matters is the leverage they think you have on them, over them. Always leverage there as an essentially emotional concept. Whether it exists or not, it can be manufactured. Always leverage then. As an essentially emotional concept, whether it exists or not, it can be manufactured. They're crazy. It's often the best moment for discovering black swans that transform a negotiation. It is whenever we hear or see something that doesn't make sense, something crazy, that a crucial fork in the road is presented. Push forward even more forcefully into that which we can't process or take the other path, the one to guaranteed failure, in which we tell ourselves that negotiating was useless anyways. Research shows that people respond favorably to requests made in a reasonable tone of voice and followed with a because reason. Knows alternatives and more real meanings. I am not ready yet to agree. You are making me feel uncomfortable. I do not understand. I don't think I can afford it. I want something else. I need more information. I want to talk it over with someone else. Values, limits, resources, gifts, thoughts, skin, words, truth, geographical distance, desires, time, emotional distance, love, other people, consequences, feelings, attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, choices. These are boundaries. Know is protection. Don't start with, do you have a few minutes to talk? Instead ask, is now a bad time to talk? Either you get, yes, it's a bad time, followed by a good time or a request to go away, or you get, no, it's not, and total focus. Empathy message. It seems like you're under a lot of pressure from your wife. Accusation audit. I know you think I don't care about costs and taking profits from the company. diffuse negative energy. Minors, mirrors. I know how the pressure from your wife can feel. I'm going through a divorce myself and it really takes a lot out of you. Silence. Acknowledge the negative and diffuse it. Start out by saying, I know they I know they fill in the blank emotion. Fill in the blank with an emotion. Extricate the information. Get the other party to disagree. Draw their own boundaries. Define their desires as a function of what they do not want. This is right. Immediately transforms. That's right. Immediately transforms any negotiation. 1. Effective pauses. Silence is powerful. Emotions drain from the dialogue. 2. Minimal encouragers. Yes, okay, I see. 3. Mirroring. 4. Labeling. Empathy. 5. Paraphrase. Repeat in my own words. 6. Summarize. Paraphrase plus labeling is a summary. How to confront and get your way without confrontation. Use the late night FM DJ voice. Start with, I'm sorry. Mirror. Silence at least 4 seconds to let the mirror work. Repeat. Use the late night FM DJ voice. Start with, I'm sorry. Mirror. Silence. At least 4 seconds to let the mirror work. Repeat. Preface the conversation by labeling my audience's fears. Don't ask. Say, in case you're worried about XYZ, I want to tell you in advance. Label their fear. Diffuse. Wait. Make the unreasonable seem less forbidding. Anchor their emotions. Start out with an accusation audit, acknowledging all of their fears. By anchoring their emotions in preparation for a loss, you inflame the other side's loss aversion, so they'll jump at the chance to avoid it. Most negotiations hit that inevitable point where the slightly loose and informative interplay between two people turns to confrontation and the proverbial brass tacks. You know the moment. You've mirrored and labeled your way to a degree of rapport. An accusation audit has cleared any lingering mental or emotional obstacles, and you've identified and summarized the interests and positions at stake, eliciting a that's right and now it's time to bargain. Passive aggressive approach. Ask the same 3 or 4 open-ended questions over and over and over and over. They get worn out answering and give me everything I want. Some variation of, how am I supposed to do that? The adversary is the situation, and the person you appear to be in conflict with is actually your partner. Understanding the other is a precondition to be able to speak persuasively and develop options that resonate for them. Black swans dwell hidden under the surface in the secret negotiation spaces. Access comes through understanding the other side's worldview, their reason for being, their religion. Digging into your counterpart's religion, sometimes involving God, but not always, inherently implies moving beyond the negotiating table and into life, emotional and otherwise, of your counterpart. Once you understand counterpart's worldview, you can build influence, unearth who they are rather than logic. No matter how much research team has done prior to interaction, always ask ourselves, why are they communicating what they are communicating right now? Concentrate on the next step because the tightrope of negotiation will lead you to the end as long as all the steps are completed. Your counterpart always has pieces of information whose value they do not understand. Every case is new. We must let what we know, our known knowns, guide us but not blind us to what we do not know. We must remain flexible and adaptable to any situation. We must always retain a beginner's mind, and we must never overvalue our experience or undervalue the informational and emotional realities served up moment by moment in whatever situation we face. You fall to your highest level of preparation. Prepare, prepare, prepare. If someone gives me guidance, they will watch to see if I follow their advice. They have a personal stake in seeing me succeed. I've just recruited my first unofficial mentor. The Black Swan Rule. Don't treat others the way you want to be treated. Treat them the way they need to be treated. When you say I, it says you're more interested in yourself than the other person. It makes you take personal responsibility for the words that follow and the offense they might cause. Be awakened to and inspired by the elemental power of emotion, dialogue, and applied psychological tactics to influence and persuade just about anyone in any situation. For a mirror to be effective, it needs a bit of silence. Let it sit there and do its work. Mirroring is the closest one gets to a Jedi mind trick. Simple, yet uncannily effective. Conflict between two parties is inevitable in all relationships. Ask someone, what do you mean by that? You're likely to incite irritation or defensiveness. Use mirroring instead. It signals respect and concern for what the other person is saying, vice versa. Truly effective negotiators are conscious of the verbal, paraverbal, how it's said, and nonverbal communications that pervade negotiations and group dynamics. And they know how to employ these subtleties to their benefit, even changing a single word when you present options, like using not lose instead of keep, can unconsciously influence the conscious choices your counterpart makes. Pay very close attention to body language and tone to make sure they match up with the literal meaning of the word. If they don't align, it's quite possible that the speaker is lying or at least unconvinced. Smart decision makers don't want to be concerned at the table into make Smart decision makers don't want to be cornered at the table into making a decision. They will defer to the people away from the table to keep from getting pinned down. Liars tend to speak in more complex sentences in an attempt to win over their suspicious counterparts. Any response that's not an outright rejection of your offer means you have the edge. Skilled bargainers see more than just opening offers, counter offers, and closing moves. They see the psychological currents that run below the surface. Some people are accommodators, others are basically assertive, and the rest are data-loving analysts. Humans all suffer from cognitive bias. Discovered more than 150 of them, Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. Know how to engage in that conflict to get what you want without inflicting damage. Negotiation is the heart of collaboration. It's what makes conflict potentially meaningful and productive for all parties. We are easily distracted. We engage in selective listening, our minds acting on a cognitive bias for consistency. Often both sides of the table are doing the same thing. State of schizophrenia. Everyone just listening to the voice in their head. The voice. Late night, FM DJ voice. Deep, soft, slow, and reassuring. Key to easing confrontation. Keep counterpart talking. How we are. Our general demeanor and delivery, that is both the easiest thing to enact and the most immediately effective mode of influence. Deliberating on approach or negotiating strategy. A refined set of powerful skills. A conscious smile to ease the tension. Use of subtle verbal and nonverbal language to signal empathy and thus security. A certain downward inflection in the voice. Embrace of specific kinds of questions and avoidance of others. Invaluable, previously hidden skills. tactical empathy. Ignoring the other party's position only builds up frustration and makes them less likely to do what you want. The opposite is tactical empathy. Labeling is a tactic, not a strategy. Labeling negatives diffuses them. Labeling positives reinforces them. No communication is always a bad sign. Take turns role-playing the two sides. Label fears and ask for input. In every negotiation, every agreement, the result comes from someone else's decision. Triggering no peels away the plastic falsehood of yes and gets you to what's really at stake. If you approach a negotiation thinking that the other guy thinks like you, you're wrong. That's not empathy, that's projection. Deadlines are almost never ironclad. When the negotiation is over for one side, it's over for the other too. When other people issue threats, they consciously or subconsciously create ambiguities and loopholes they fully intend to exploit. We just want what's fair. The best response. Okay, I apologize. Let's stop everything and go back to where I started treating you unfairly, and we'll fix it. Sales. An emotional framing job. Know the emotional drivers. People will take greater risks to avoid loss than to achieve gains. Loss aversion. Let the other guy go first, most of the time. Let the other side anchor monetary negotiations. Prepare yourself psychically to withstand the first offer. The tendency to be anchored by extreme numbers, anchor and adjustment, psychological quirk. Establish a range. People who hear extreme anchors unconsciously adjust their expectations in the direction of the opening number. Bolstering range. Low number in the range was what they actually wanted. Pivot to non-monetary terms. Don't deal with numbers in isolation. After I've anchored them high, make offer reasonable by offerings that aren't important to me but can be to them. By offerings that aren't important to me but could be to them. If their offer is low, I could ask for things that matter more to me than them. When you do talk numbers, use odd ones. Such numbers feel serious and permanent to my counterparts. They fortify my offers. Following on the heels of an argument is a great position for a negotiator because your counterpart is desperate for an empathetic connection. The secret to gaining the upper hand in negotiation is giving the other side the illusion of control. Suspend unbelief. If you don't get off unbelief, you end up having a showdown as each side tries to impose its point of view. If you can get the other side to drop their unbelief, you can slowly work them to your point of view on the back of their energy. Calibrated questions make your counterpart feel like they're in charge, but it's really you who are framing the conversation. You need to regulate your emotions if you want to have any hope of coming out on top in negotiations. When people feel that they are not in control, they adopt hostage mentality, and in moments of conflict, react to their lack of power by becoming extremely defensive or lashing out. Yes is nothing without how. Answering questions gives the counterpart the illusion of control of the negotiation. The trick to how questions is that correctly used, they are gentle and graceful ways to say no and guide your counterpart to develop a better solution, your solution. A gentle how/no invites collaboration and leaves your counterpart with a feeling of having been treated with respect. Don't try to force your opponent to admit that you are right. Aggressive confrontation is the enemy of constructive negotiation. You're dealing with the person who wants to be appreciated and understood. Use labels to reinforce and encourage positive perceptions and dynamics. Tools of tactical empathy. Extensions of natural human interactions. Listen and acknowledge other situations. Repeat how they feel twice or once. There is some information that you can only get through direct, extended interactions with your counterpart. Demonstrating an understanding of what they're going through and how they feel about it. We know true hypotheses from false ones. Multiple hypotheses. The rule of three. Getting the other guy to agree to the same thing 3 times in the same conversations triple the strength of whatever dynamic you're trying to drill into at that moment. Doing so uncovers problems before they happen. It's really hard to repeatedly lie a fake conviction. A surprisingly high percentage of negotiations hinge on something outside dollars and cents, often having more to do with self-esteem, status, and other non-financial needs. The rule of three. Vary your tactics. The first time they agree or give a compliment, the first time they agree or give a commitment, label or summarize what they said so they answer, "That's right." How or what calibrated question about implementation that asks them to explain, "What do we do if we get off track?" Use your own name creates the dynamic of forced empathy and makes the other side see you as a person. I'm a normal paradox. I am normal paradox. The greatest obstacle to accurately identifying someone else's style. That is, our hypothesis that the world should look to others as it looks to us. After all, who wouldn't make that assumption? Taking a punch, too. If the other side pushes you to go first, wiggle from his grip. Instead of naming a price, allude to an incredibly high number that someone else might charge when they're buying. In a negotiation, when I want to knock someone back, say, "Why did you do that?" It's an iffy technique. Psychological judo of negotiating. The calibrated questions, the mirrors, the tools for knocking my counterpart off his game and getting him to bid against himself. The person across the table is never the problem. The unsolved issue is. So focus on the issue. Our culture demonizes people in movies and politics, which creates the mentality that if we only got rid of the person, then everything would be okay. But this dynamic is toxic to any negotiation. If you feel you can't say no, then you've taken yourself hostage. Once you're clear on what your bottom line is, you have to be willing to walk away. Never be needy for a deal. Maintain a collaborative relationship even when you're setting boundaries. Ackerman bargaining. Set your target price or your goal. Set your first offer at 65% of your target price. Calculate 3 raises of decreasing increments to 85, 95, and 100%. Use lots of empathy and different ways of saying no to get the other side to counter before you increase your offer. When calculating the final amount, use precise, non-round numbers like, say, $37,893 rather than $38,000. It gives the number credibility and weight. On your final number, throw in a non-monetary term that they probably don't want to show you're at your limit. On your final number, throw in a non-monetary item that they probably don't want to show you're at your limit. Ackerman bargaining 2. System incorporates psychological tactics, reciprocity, extreme anchors, loss aversion. Ackerman bargaining juices their self-esteem. Researchers have found that people getting concessions often feel better about the bargaining process. It's found by researchers, people getting concessions often feel better about the bargaining process than those who are given a single firm, fair offer. In fact, they feel better even when they end up paying more or receiving less than they otherwise might. "I don't understand" is the legitimate response. has no relation to playing dumb. Playing dumb is a valid negotiation technique. When someone puts out a ridiculous offer, one that really pisses you off, take a deep breath. Allow a little anger and channel it at the proposal, not the person, and say, I don't see how that would ever work. Such well timed offense taking. Strategic umbrage. Wake your counterpart to the problem. When someone puts out a nope. The only time you can use why successfully is when the defensiveness that is created supports the change I am trying to get them to see. Why would you ever change from the way you've always done things and try my approach? Why is accusatory. How engages because how asks for help. The rule of three. The same calibrated question phrased three different ways. What's the biggest challenge you faced? What are we up against here? What do you see as being the most difficult thing to get around? Rejecting perceived unfairness, even at a substantial cost, is a powerful motivation. The most common use is a judo-like defensive move that destabilizes the other side. We just want what's fair. Use some people's fear of deadlines, the mysterious power of odd numbers, and our misunderstood relationship to fairness to always bend our counterparts' reality so it conforms to what we believe, so it conforms to what we ultimately want to give them, not what they initially think they deserve. Positive and constructive use of F word set stage for honest and empathetic communication. Early on say, I want you to feel like you are being treated fairly at all times. So please stop me at any time if you feel I'm being unfair and we'll address it. The small but critical mistake is to give credence to the negative through denying when the negative should be prefaced with a label that diffuses and makes the unreasonable seem less forbidding. When I make a mistake, I always acknowledge the other person's anger. The phrase, look, I'm an asshole, amazingly effective way to make problems go away. Threats delivered without anger but with poise, that is, confidence and self control, are great tools. Saying, I'm sorry, that just doesn't work for me, with poise works. When you say, I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me, the word I strategically focuses your counterpart's attention on you to leverage on you long enough for you to make a point. The traditional I message is to use I to hit the pause button and step out of a bad dynamic. When you want to counteract unproductive statements from your counterpart, you can say, I feel blank when you blank because blank. And that demands a timeout from the other person. Be careful with the big I. You have to be mindful not to use a tone that is aggressive or creates an argument. It's got to be cool and level. Never be ignored. Provoke a no. Have you given up on this project? Suspend unbelief. Unbelief, active resistance to what the other side is saying, complete rejection. That's where the two parties in a negotiation usually start. How forces your counterpart to explain and consider how a deal will be implemented. Taking a punch. You can always respond to an anchor by simply pivoting the terms. When you feel you're being dragged into a haggle, you can detour the conversation to the non-monetary issues that make any final price work. Let's put price off to the side for a moment and talk about what would make these a great deal. Let's put price off to the side for a moment and talk about what would make this a great deal. What else would you be able to offer to make the What else would you be able to offer to make that a good price for me? Black swans, those hidden and unexpected pieces of information, those unknown unknowns, whose unearthing has game-changing effects on negotiating a dynamic. Theory tells us that things happen that were previously thought to be impossible, or never thought of at all. Things never imagined do come to pass. Each side in every negotiation is in possession of at least three black swans, three pieces of information that were they to be discovered by the other side would change everything. Finding black swans in a negotiation shifts to a three-dimensional game. Finding black swans in a negoti- Finding black swans in negotiations shifts to a three-dimensional game that's emotional, adaptive, intuitive, and truly effective. The most basic challenge is that people don't know what don't The most basic challenge is that people don't know the questions to ask the customer, the user, the counterpart. Unless correctly interrogated, most people aren't able to articulate the information you want. Is the person best able to unearth, adapt to, and exploit the unknowns that will come out on top. You have to feel for the truth behind the camouflage. You have to note the small pauses that suggest comfort and lies. Read nonverbal cues and always voice your observations with your counterpart. What business is successful if there's only one buyer? Counterpart has something you love, but you have something they lust for, which is more powerful. Leverage isn't the same thing as power. To get leverage, you have to persuade your counterpart that they have something real to lose if the deal falls through. Three kinds: positive, negative, normative. Positive leverage is your ability as a negotiator to provide or withhold things your counterpart wants. Whenever the other side says, I want, as in, I want to buy your car, you have positive leverage. You have power. You can make the desire come true. You have power. You can make their desire come true. You can withhold it and thereby inflict pain. Or you can use their desire to get a better deal with another party. Experienced negotiators delay making offers. They don't want to give up leverage. Positive leverage should improve your psychology during negotiation. You're gone from a situation where you want something from the investor to a situation where you both want something from each other. Negative leverage. Ability of negotiator to make his counterpart suffer. It is based on threats. If you don't fulfill your commitment / pay your bill, I will destroy your reputation. Loss aversion concept. Potential losses loom larger in the human mind than do similar gains. Normative leverage. Every person has a set of rules and a moral framework. Normative leverage is using the other party's norms and standards to advance your position. If you can show inconsistencies between their beliefs and their actions, can be as easy as asking what your counterpart believes and listening openly. See what language they speak and speak it back to them. For example, if counterpart lets slip that the generally that if for example, if counterpart lets slip that they generally pay a certain multiple of cash flow when they buy a company, you can frame your desired price in a way that reflects that valuation. Counterparts will surrender to an adversary that respects him and his belief. Paradox of power. The harder we push, the more likely we are to be met with resistance. Use negative leverage sparingly. Review everything you hear. You will not hear everything the first time, so double check. Compare notes with your team members. You will often discover new information that will help you advance the negotiation. Use backup listeners whose only job is to listen between the lines. They will hear things you miss. When you ascertain your counterpart's unattained goals, invoke your own power and follow ability by expressing passion for their goals and for their ability to achieve them, creating immortal moments. Who doesn't want to come to an agreement with someone who is going to make them immortal? Understanding their religion, their fanaticism, and their delusions is the best way to discover the other side's vulnerabilities and wants, and thereby gain influence. You can't get that stuff unless you talk. But no one is immune to "they're crazy." It rears its head in every kind of negotiation. Mistake number 1. They are ill-informed. GIGO. Garbage in, garbage out. People operating within incomplete information appear crazy to those who have different information. Your job when faced with someone like this in a negotiation is to discover what they don't know and supply that information. Mistake number 2. They're constrained. They have things they can't do but aren't eager to reveal. They may just not have the power to close the deal. Find the black swan. Observe unguarded moments. Effective during unguarded moments at the fringes, at meals, or brief moments of relaxation before or after formal interactions. Pay close attention during interruptions, odd exchanges, or anything that interrupts the flow. Simply noticing who cracks and how others respond verbally and non-verbally can reveal a gold mine. When it doesn't make sense, there's sense to be made. Black swans are anything that you don't know that changes things. Sweaty palms are just an expression of physiological fear, a few trigger-happy neurons firing because of something more base. Our innate human desire to get along with other members of the tribe. It's not the guy across the table who scares us. It's conflict itself. Skilled negotiators have a talent for using conflict to keep the negotiating going without stumbling into a personal battle. Genuine, honest conflict between people over their goals actually helps energize the problem-solving process in a collaborative way. When you ask calibrated questions, yes, you are leading your counterpart to your goals, but you are also leading them to examine and articulate what they want and why and how they can achieve it. You are demanding creativity of them and therefore pushing them toward a collaborative solution. Every negotiation, every conversation, every moment of life is a series of small conflicts that, managed well, can rise to creative beauty. Embrace them. When implementation happens by committee, the support of that committee is key. You always have to identify and unearth their motivations. Calibrated questions. How does this affect the rest of your team? How on board are the people not on this call? What do your colleagues see as their main challenges in this area? How do we make sure we deliver the right material to the right people? Accusation audit. Acknowledge counterpart situation while simultaneously shifting the onus of offering a solution. Common ground. The counterpart's first instinct is to add nuance and detail to fears after labeling. Going right after negativity brings us to a safe zone of empathy. Beautiful. You can usually express no 4 times before actually saying the real word. You can usually express no 4 times before actually saying the word. How am I supposed to do that? Your offer is very generous. I'm sorry, that just doesn't work for me. Nurtures and builds empathy. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I just can't do that. Triggers empathy. I'm sorry, no. Delivered gently barely sounds negative. No, downward inflection and tone of regard, most direct. Negotiation is coaxing, not overcoming. Co-opting, not defeating. Successful negotiation involves getting your counterpart to do the work for you and suggest your solution himself. A solitary monetary terms of success terms is Russian roulette. Once you've negotiated a money compensation, make sure to define success for your position as well as metrics for your next raise. Instead of countering and getting stuck in how much, keep talking, labeling the counterpart's emotions and empathizing with their situation. Getting the yes. Separate the person, the emotion from the problem. Don't get wrapped in the other side's position. Focus on why, not what. Work cooperatively to generate win-win options. Establish mutually agreed upon standards for evaluating these possible solutions. Pivot to non-monetary terms. Don't deal with numbers in isolation. Make offers seem reasonable by giving perks to them when anchoring high, or ask for perks from them when we've given you a fair offer. Accusation of being dense or dishonest meant to distract attention and manipulate, coerce/persuade into giving in. Best response: mirroring, followed by labeling. Fair: it seems like you're ready to prove the evidence that supports that. Fair: it seems like you're ready to provide the evidence that supports that. A willingness to change my approach and techniques unleashes the ability to get inside the head and eventually under the skin of my counterpart. Having the right mindset is the key. It isn't being right. When you phrase a label as a neutral statement of understanding, it encourages your counterpart to be responsive. They'll always give a longer answer than yes or no. If they disagree with the label, that's okay. You can always step back and say, I didn't say that's what it was. You can always step back and say, I didn't say that was what it was. I would just said it seems like that. Straight shooters. All I have to do is keep my counterpart talking, and they shall come around. Keep the counterpart talking. Basically try to persuade, coerce, or manipulate them. This is a problem solver, not a people mover. Limited negotiating approach. Tactical empathy. Recognize your counterpart's perspective and then gain trust through labeling. Active listening. Techniques. Mirroring, silences, late night FM DJ voice. Attack the open space. How many unaccounted minutes will I account to using prioritizing the priorities? Urgent to-dos. When opens up, what's the most important thing I can do in the next open space? Trim the fat. Must organize. Organizing develops priority. No is a safe choice that maintains the status quo. It provides a temporary oasis of control. No always alters the conversation. Label your counterpart's fears to diffuse our power. Label your counterpart's fears to diffuse their power. Acknowledge the other person's situation. Convey that you're listening. Once they know that you're listening, they may tell you something that you can use. People's emotions have two levels. Presenting behavior is the part above you can see and hear. Underlying feeling is what motivates the behavior. The last rule of labeling is silence. A label's power is that it invites the other person to reveal himself. Go silent. Let the label do its work. 3 voice tones available to negotiators. 1. The late night FM DJ voice. The positive, playful voice. The default, easygoing, good-natured attitude, light, encouraging. The direct or assertive voice, used rarely, will cause problems and create pushback. Empathy, the ability to recognize the perspective of a counterpart, the vocalization of that recognition. Tactically is understanding the feelings and mindset of another in the moment and also hearing what is behind those feelings so you increase your influence in all the moments that follow. If I empathize, I can mold my audience by how I approach and talk to them. When I have them clearly in my mind, I can become who I need to be to handle this situation. Labeling. Spot their feelings. Turn them into words. Very calmly and respectfully repeat their emotions back to them. A way of validating someone's emotion by acknowledging it. Secret. people never even notice. He who has learned to disagree without being disagreeable has discovered the most valuable secret of negotiation. Robert Estabrook. If talking to somebody who is not listening, antagonize them into no. Mislabel one of the other party's emotions or desires. You/I say something that I know is totally wrong. Another way, ask the other party what they don't want. Let's talk about what you would say no to, I'd say. Meeting halfway often leads to bad deals for both sides. Accusation audit. Disarm your counterpart's complaints about you by speaking them aloud. After your counterpart's counter, don't say no or yes, but keep talking and create empathy. Include the F word, fair, then sell them on ambassadorship. Negotiators have to be decision architects. They have to dynamically and adaptively design the verbal and nonverbal elements of the negotiation to gain both consent and execution. Resist the consequences of deadlines that create pressure and anxiety. Good negotiators force themselves to resist this urge and take advantage of it in others. When you have allowed the variable of time to trigger such thinking, you have taken yourself hostage. Environment of reactive behavior. Learn how important it is to go directly at negative dynamics in a fearless but deferential manner. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. To get real leverage, you have to persuade them that they are something. To get real leverage, you have to persuade them that they have something concrete to lose if the deal falls through. Be aware of a counterpart's use of pronouns. Be aware of a counterpart's use of pronouns, we/they or me/I. The less important he makes himself, the more important he probably is, and vice versa. Approaching deadlines entice people to rush the negotiating process and do impulsive things that are against their best interest. When you push for implementation and they say, I'll try, you should get a sinking feeling in your stomach because this really means I plan to fail. Lower the hostage mentality in your counterpart by asking a question or even offering an apology. You're right, that was a bit harsh. Train our neocortex to override the emotions from the other two brains. List the worst thing the other party could say about you and say them before the other person can. Performing an accusation audit in advance prepares you to head off negative dynamics before they take root. Because accusations often sound exaggerated when said aloud, speaking them will encourage the other person to claim that quite the opposite is true. Mirroring. Continued mirroring starts a vomiting of information. Isopraxism. Copy each other to comfort each other. Speech patterns, body language, vocabulary, tempo, and tone of voice. Sign that people are bonding, in sync, and establishing the kind of rapport that leads to trust. That's right is great, but if you're right, nothing changes. That's right is great, but if you're right, nothing changes. Realization point is an agreement. Agreement equals free will. Free will equals embrace. Embrace equals their idea. Never split the difference. Don't settle. Creative solutions are always preceded by some degree of risk, annoyance, confusion, and conflict. Accommodation and compromise produce none of that. Embrace the hard stuff to get the great deals. No allows the real issues to be brought forth. No protects people from making and lets them correct ineffective decisions. No slows things down so that people can feel freely embrace their decisions and the agreements they enter into. No helps people feel safe, secure, emotionally comfortable, and in control of their decisions. No makes everyone's no moves everyone's efforts forward. Compromise is often a bad deal. No compromise is often a bad deal. No deal is better than a bad deal. No deal is better than a bad deal. We just want what's fair. This implicit accusation immediately triggers feelings of defensiveness and discomfort. Feelings are often subconscious and often lead to an irrational concession. There are three kinds of yes: counterfeit, confirmation, commitment. The best way to deal with negativity is to observe it without reaction and without judgment. Then consciously label each negative feeling and replace it with positive, compassionate, and solution-based thoughts. Open-ended question. What else is there you feel is important to add to this? Good negotiators identify and influence instead of denying or ignoring emotions. Precisely label emotions, those of others and especially my own. Talk about them without getting wound up. Emotions aren't the obstacles, they are the means. Be pleasantly persistent on non-monetary terms. Pleasant persistence is a kind of emotional anchoring that creates empathy with the boss and builds the right psychological environment for constructive discussion. The boss is the counterpart in negotiations. Surprise with the gift. Get them into a mood of generosity by staking an extreme anchor. Then, after inevitable first rejection, offer a wholly unrelated surprising gift. Unexpected conciliatory gestures create reciprocity bias. Question the assumptions that the rest accept on faith or in arrogance. Emotionally open to all possibilities. Intellectually agile to a fluid situation. Our own biases often lead us to making assumptions. Our own biases often leads us to making assumptions before meeting others. I, even ignore our own assumptions to make them conform to foregone conclusions. Smart people have trouble being negotiators. They think they don't have anything to discover. Extract and observe as much information as possible. Get over your aversion to negotiating. Play the emotional and spiritual game that human society is set up for. Get over your aversion to negotiating. Play the emotional and spiritual game that human society is set up for. Do not believe in making direct threats and be extremely careful with even subtle ones. Threats can be like nuclear bombs. There will be a toxic residue that will be difficult to clean up. You have to handle the potential of negative consequences with care, or you will hurt yourself and poison or blow up the whole process. If you shove your negative leverage down your counterpart's throat, it might be perceived as you taking away their autonomy. People will often sooner die than give up their autonomy. They'll at least act out irrationally and shut off the negotiation. Every engineer, every executive, every child, all of us, wants to believe we are capable of the extraordinary. When someone displays a passion for what we've always wanted and conveys a purposeful plan of how to get there, we allow our perceptions of what's possible to change. We're all hungry for a map to joy, and when someone is courageous enough to draw it for us, we naturally follow. Don't avoid honest, clear conflict. It will get you the best car price, the higher salary, and the largest donation. It will also save your marriage, your friendship, and your family. One can only be an exceptional negotiator and a great person by listening and speaking clearly and empathetically, by treating counterparts and oneself with dignity and respect, and most of all by being honest about what one wants and what one can and cannot do. People will take more risks to avoid a loss than to realize a gain. Make sure your counterpart sees that there is something to lose by interaction. Make sure your counterpart sees that there is something to lose by inaction. Certainty effect. People are drawn to sure things over probabilities, even when the probability is a better choice. Acknowledge the situation and label your counterpart's emotion. We don't see each other all that often. It seems like you feel we don't pay any it's we don't see each other all that often. It seems like you feel we don't pay any attention to you only see us once a year, so why should you make time for us? Grandpa's grumpy behavior underlying sadness. People generally fear conflict, so they avoid useful arguments out of fear that the tone will escalate into personal attacks they cannot handle. People in close relationships often avoid making their own interests known and instead compromise across the board to avoid being perceived as greedy or self-interested. They fold, they grow bitter, and they grow apart. Push for no. Nudge counterpart into a zone where he is making decisions. Further his or her feelings of safety and power with a question, inviting them to define my next move. Open-ended, calibrated. No is a reaffirmation of autonomy. It's a pause, a nudge, and a chance for the speaker to articulate what they do want. What they, what they do want. Creating unconditional, positive regard opens the door to changing thoughts and behaviors. Humans have an innate urge towards socially constructive behavior. The more a person feels understood and positively affirmed in that understanding, the more likely that urge for constructive behavior will take hold. Behavioral change stairway model. Active listening, empathy, rapport, influence, behavioral change. Calibrate our words to gain approval, but disclose little.